Did you know that the NFL players weren't required to wear helmets until 1943? Before the NFL was called the NFL, it was called the American Professional Football Association, and it was founded in 1920 by a man named Jim Thorpe of Canton, Ohio. The NFL lately had a bad rap for the players getting in trouble with drugs or domestic violence. The NFL has since been trying their best to put a halt on those numbers. The NFL has also had many of their players develop CTE, and CTE is ruining their families. These players are losing their memory, and some players are even becoming suicidal and killing themselves because of depression, because CTE causes depression. According to the article NFL Football, A History of America's New National Pastime, the rise of National Football League came from a disorganized group of untrustworthy teams in the industrial towns of the Midwest. Today, the National Football League is a global operation with $9 billion in annual revenue. When the league first started, the players were making anywhere from $100 to $300 per game, and they played 13 games every season. The NFL was founded in 1920 as the American Professional Football Association with 13 teams. And they had 5 states included. These teams were the Akron Pros, the Canton Bulldogs, the Cleveland Tigers, the Columbus Panhandlers, the Dayton Triangles, the Chicago Tigers, the Decatur Staleys, the Racine Cardinals, and the Buffalo All-Americans, with the Rochester Jeffersons. These teams varied from Ohio, Chicago, New York, Indiana, and Michigan. League membership gradually stabilized throughout the 1920s and 1930s as the league adopted a more formal organization. The first official championship game was held in 1933. The NFL stopped signing black players in 1927, but reintegrated in 1946 following World War II. There were other changes that followed after the war, such as the office of league president evolved into a more powerful commissioner post, similar to what the Major League Baseball did. Teams became more financially viable. The last team folded in 1952, and the league absorbed teams from the briefly more successful All-American Football League in 1950, of which only the San Francisco 49ers and the Cleveland Browns survived to present day. In 1958, the NFL championship game became known as the greatest game ever played, and the NFL was on its way to becoming one of the most popular sports leagues in the United States. The rival American Football League was founded in 1960. It was very successful, but was eventually merged with the NFL, which created a larger league and led to the creation of the Super Bowl. Today, the Super Bowl has become the most watched annual sporting event in the United States. The league continued to expand and is currently made up of 32 teams. A series of labor agreements during the 1990s and increasingly large television contracts have helped the league become one of the most profitable in the U.S. The NFL is also the only major league in the United States since 1990 to avoid a work stoppage that resulted in the loss of a regular season game. NFL football offers a fascinating lens through which to view a lot of the major themes of the 20th century. For example, the league's early inclusion of the African American players, its ban on black players in the 1930s at the request of the Boston team, which then moved to Washington, D.C., and their reintroduction after World War II. Now to the present, the NFL has recently struggled with players and laws, especially when it comes to drugs and domestic violence. According to When Pros Become Cons, ending the NFL's history of domestic violence leniency article, the league has recently been trying to put an end to domestic violence in the NFL by enforcing a major penalty. The players found guilty of domestic violence, they are immediately dismissed from playing in the NFL. Since the 1990s, NFL commissioners progressively exercised their disciplinary power under the NFL's constitution in response to the increasing number of players involved in domestic violence. The NFL commissioners progressed from not disciplining domestic abusers to punishing crimes of violence, to specifically outlining domestic violence as conduct detrimental to the integrity of public confidence in the NFL. Now the NFL imposes discipline for actual or threatened physical violence against another person, including dating violence and domestic violence. Although there is still outside criticism, the NFL and Goodell have history of addressing domestic violence head on. Concussions have been a big problem in the NFL with players like developing CTE, and it is ruining families. So the NFL is trying to eliminate the numbers of concussions. They have now put in a penalty that is called targeting, and it's whenever a player leads with the crown of their helmet and hits the other player above the neck, and that is an automatic ejection. And if it was in the third or fourth quarter, you'll miss the first half of your next game. So they're trying to eliminate the amount of concussions that is happening in the NFL. There's evidence that suggests that the incident stagnates or decreases in the final quarter of the season in comparison to the third quarter. This anomaly cannot be explained by any of the known modulators of concussion incidents. However, the fact that teams started getting eliminated from playoff contention in the fourth quarter of the season may explain the pattern in concussion incidents. This study tests whether there is a difference in concussion incidents in games between teams who are still in the playoff hunt versus games where both teams have had their playoff fate already determined.